Hi everybody. So today's date is the 22nd of February 2018, and this is our second leadership call for Team Spirit. And I'm quickly going to do some continued education before I pass over to Ali, who's going to talk about making lotions and potions with Doterra Essential oils. So the first oil I'm going to talk about, because we said we're going to do it in alphabetical order, so we're now up to B for bergamot. So this is an amazing oil. I absolutely love it. It's so uplifting. It is out of stock at the moment, but it's due to be back in the warehouse at the end of this month, at the end of February. So you can apply it to the neck and the bottoms of the feet. You do have to be careful with bergamot though, because it does, it can cause photosensitivity. So if you go out in the sunshine, you're more likely to get burnt. So what you want to do is to make sure that if you do apply it and then you go out in the sunshine, you want to make sure you apply it to places where you're not going to be exposed to the sun. Okay, so it's really good for insomnia. So you can inhale it or diffuse it before sleep. And my eldest loves to diffuse it with lavender. She chose that mix herself, and then I found out that actually that is a really good blend. It smells amazing. Also for stress as well, for joint issues and muscle cramps, for any fungal issues, for coughs, infections and bronchitis, for acne, oily skin, eczema and psoriasis, which I didn't know about. I didn't know it'd be good for eczema actually. Also is great for appetite loss. Self-worth issues. So there's quite a lot of emotional side to bergamot. And I have got my emotions book, and I'm going to tell you that bergamot is the oil of self-acceptance. So if you feel despair, low self-esteem, self-judgment, unlovable and hopeless, then bergamot is an amazing oil for you. And they were telling me that in the States, in some of the classrooms, they've started to diffuse bergamot in the schools because it just helps children with their self-esteem, which I thought was really nice, a really great idea. The second oil I'm going to talk to you about is black pepper. This one I've only recently purchased myself, but this is great for things like constipation, diarrhea and gas, respiratory, lymphatic drainage and cleansing, poor circulation, cold, flu, aches and chills, congested airways. It's great for food flavour, but remember, you just want to be adding like a toothpick. It's quite strong. Anxiety as well, which I didn't realise. I'm going to give that a go. Cramps, sprains and muscle spasms. Now, I kind of knew about this because Ali had used it in her labour. So I already kind of knew it was good for that. Also, apparently great for helping you give up smoking, which I guess that does make sense. You just put a drop under your tongue, apparently, and inhale it. And also it's a great one for emotional balance to help you become more honest. So I love that, and I'm going to try and use my black pepper a bit more. You can blend it as well with things like cardamom, copaiba, clove, juniper berry and manuka as well. And the black pepper is also found in the On Guard soft gels, which I didn't realise. I'd forgotten that it was in there. So yeah, loving black pepper. So let us know how you use bergamot and black pepper, if there's any new ideas that we can try. But now I'm going to pass you over to Ali, who's going to be talking to us about how to make your own products using Doterra's essential oils. So over to you, Ali.
Hi, thank you. So yeah, I had a thought about what I was going to talk to you about in regards to making your own products. And of course, that can go from anything to a rollerball to a lotion or a bubble bath. So there's so many different things that you can make. And there's so much information out there that I thought I would kind of go to the basics today, and maybe it's something we can explore on another video, but there just probably wouldn't be enough time to go through everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the basics today, which is on making your own creams. And the kind of things that you would want to look out for and consider when you're making your own creams. So one of the kind of most popular things that seems to pop up on the group is things like eczema, dry skin, And of course, although the fundamentals are the same, as in, try and use things like lavender and frankincense, actually what you use as the base of the cream may change significantly to, like, if you're working with a baby or maybe an older relative. So it's all of these things that I want, like, to kind of explain and go through. So I'm just going to share the presentation that I've done. Hopefully it will work. So yeah, we're talking about obviously making our own products here. So what you're going to need when you're going to be making your own creams is a double boiler, a thermometer, a wooden stick, measuring cup, butter, as in, not as in like dairy butter, but as in like a cosmetic butter, so maybe like cocoa butter or mango butter, a wax, carrier oil, essential oils, and obviously something to put it in. Now, most of us don't have a double boiler, and that's absolutely fine. So what I usually do is I have a saucepan with some hot water in that I allow to boil, and then I use a bowl, and I use that as where to melt the waxes and the butters. Ideally, you want to go for something that is easily to be cleaned, because obviously when you're using stuff, the wax can get quite sticky. So I use a metal bowl. But bear in mind, a metal bowl does get extremely hot as well. Or you could use like a Pyrex bowl or something as well to melt the butters and waxes, because obviously they're solid when you get them. So first of all, one of the things that you want to consider is what you're actually going to put in your cream. What is it that you want to use? And there's actually a rule of thumb about using different essential oils. Now, what you'll find is a lot of the recipes that you'll see online, they've already done all the hard work for you, but you might want to do something yourself. And interestingly, I picked black pepper without knowing that Claire was going to do black pepper. But black pepper is amazing for muscle pain. So I've used it with lemongrass and rosemary. And frankincense when I had an injury. So my other half doesn't like deep blue, but this one is actually a lighter fragrance. So it's working out the combinations, because obviously you don't want something that's massively overpowering. And what you find is the top notes are the things that you smell instantly when you open something up. Like, it's the top notes that hit you first. And it's the base notes that are kind of, you don't notice as much. And of course, then they're the ones that actually linger less as well, the base notes. The top notes will hang around a lot longer. So obviously you don't want to be overpowered with the top notes. And so I've given you an example. It's 20, 35, 45. Now, a lot of the time you'll have recipes come up saying use 1 millimeter of essential oils, which is effectively about 20 drops. So I've used that as the kind of template for how you would work out your top, middle note and base notes. So you're looking at like 4, 7 and 9 really, if for every milliliter. And this is really important when you're doing your creams, because you will need to know how many drops per milliliter. Some fragrances do have crossovers, so they're kind of top and middle notes, and on those instances I would adjust the recipe accordingly. So maybe you would actually reduce the amount of drops in the middle notes so that it balances out, and lemongrass is one of those. It has top and middle notes. So I've given you a list of all the top, middle and note base oils, so it gives you a really good idea. Now, a lot of the time, like, I really like lemongrass, black pepper and rosemary, but what you'll see is that they are both top and middle notes, and you wouldn't have any base notes. But frankincense is a really, really good oil for driving other oils into the skin. So I would always use frankincense. If you can't think of anything else, something like frankincense or myrrh or even vetiver are really, really good for like as a base note. And just because they have really good properties as well. I find like Lang Lang is is too overpowering as a base note because it's more of a middle note as well. But if you stick to those like really earthy base notes, and I think you'll notice like if you smelt them, like patchouli, myrrh, cedarwood, they're all quite earthy tones. So try and find one that complements what you're using. But like if all else fails, always go with frankincense, because that will always help drive the other essential oils through the cream that you're using. So the other thing to consider is what kind of carrier oil you're going to use. Now, this again would work even if you were using a rollerball. So the kind of go-to is using a coconut oil, a fractionated coconut oil, because that is what doTERRA sell. But there are so many different oils out there, and you really need to kind of consider like what your skin type is. Have you got a skin type that like clogs quite easily? Now, if you do, you don't want to be going with something that's like high in comedogenic. So you want to avoid things like coconut oil and cocoa butter, and you want to be going for the lighter oils, say something like safflower or shea butter. You could probably go with castor oil as well if you wanted. And again, it depends on the kind of person that you're using it on. So with babies and with older people, sometimes, a faster absorption is better, just because having the oil on their skin can be quite annoying, or children, they're more likely to rub it off, so it's not going to get absorbed as quickly, or older people, they may find it irritating. And also, what's the oil for? Is it for something that's offering instant release? So if it's something like you want to use lavender because it's stopping an itch or it's stopping a sore, then you don't want something that's going to take a long time to get into the skin. You want something that's quick. So again, you would go with something like safflower or grapeseed or apricot. And the idea is to kind of consider all these variables and find the one that kind of meets in the middle for you all. So for me personally, I particularly like safflower because it's not known for clogging pores. It does have a fast absorption rate, and it can be used on pretty much most skins. It's quite good for all skins. So that's a really, really good all-rounder, and it kind of gets ignored because it's not one that's, used a lot. But if you can get a really good safflower oil, it's one that I would consider using. So I've just given you a breakdown of some other oils as well for you to have a look at. And it really explains like kind of what type of carrier oil may be best for you. And again, like this is for any recipe that you're making, whether it's a cream or a rollerball. Even bath oils will sometimes call for a carrier oil. Maybe if you're doing massages, you might want to consider using different oils for different people. So there's a really, really good list here for you to actually consider, what it is you're using, what kind of properties they've got, does it match what you're trying to make? The next thing you want to consider is what kind of fat you want to use. Now, if I go back to my chart here, we have actually included like some of the fats and their properties. But yeah, it's worth considering what fat you want to use. You could use a combination of the two. I tend to use a combination of the cacao butter with maybe a shea butter or mango butter. Cacao butter is really, really hard. So it is really good if you're making things like sunscreens, because when the cream gets really hot, obviously it's going to melt a lot quicker. So if you're taking a sunscreen to a hot country, you want something that's slightly harder so that it isn't melting on the beach, which isn't really helpful. So it's also a really good thickening agent. So you could use it for things like lipsticks or lip balms. Again, you know what it's like when you've got a lip balm in the summer. If you put it on and it's kind of melting everywhere, so you want to avoid that. You would use something like cocoa butter. Again, it really helps as well if you wanted to make like a whipped butter. Then something like cacao butter will actually keep it firm and keep it whipped up. So you would maybe want to consider something like that. I really like mango butter. It's really, really soft. It's got a really nice smell to it. And And again, shea butter is really well known for things like its vitamin content. So you would probably use something like that. And again, it's really good for using your own deodorants and stuff. And another really weird one is coconut butter. And again, that's really high in like fatty acids and vitamins, but it's not so popular, but it is one that isn't a skin clogger. So again, like when you're making something perhaps like sunscreen, you might want to consider mixing that with the cocoa butter, because the last thing you want is a sunscreen that's going to end up causing you loads of spots, because obviously you may be sweating more when you're away, so you want something that allows your pores to breathe as well. So all of these things, again, are worth considering when you're making your products. So I'm just going to talk about what you actually need when you want to make a cream. Now, what changes in the cream obviously is what butters you use, what carrier oil you use, and what essential oils you use. So, you know, every cream can be completely different, but you really want to aim for like 15 to 20% wax, 55 to 60% fats, and that's combined. So you could have, you know, 3 different fats if you wanted to, but it still has to equal that kind of percentage. Then your carrier oil is 23 to 24, and then your essential oils is 1 to 2%. Now, as a word of warning, I would only use 1% essential oils if they are oils that are not designed to necessarily be used neat. If they're oils that are used to be are meant to be used neat, then I would definitely say go with 2%. So you could use some gentler stuff like lavender and tea tree oil and things like that as 2%. But if you've got something that's like a hot oil, maybe like clove or something, then I would definitely stick to the 1%. It doesn't sound like a lot of essential oils, but it really is. I mean, you're talking in a 200 milligram tub, you're talking about 40 drops of essential oils. So that is actually quite a high ratio of oils. And if you apply that same logic as well to rollerballs for adults, and you're thinking that most rollerballs are maybe 10 mils, then you're looking at, you know, like a couple of drops in a rollerball for 10 for so you don't want to be like overpowering, and of course they're going to affect the consistency of your cream as well. So on a safe side, I always stick with 1%. But you know, if you had something like a muscle rub where you're using lemongrass, black pepper, rosemary, and frankincense, for example, you might go with a 2%, because it's going to be used for kind of like a painful area, and you want like really good results, and you can use all of those oils neat, so you might want to go for a stronger concoction, but as a general rule, stick to 1%. And of course, like I say, the reason there's a difference in the percentage as well is depending on where you're going to use it. So if you know you're going to be using it somewhere where the climate is quite cold, or you're going to store it in the fridge, then you want to go with less wax. If you know that you're going to be using it in the summer, or you're going to be using it while you're away, then you definitely want to go with something that is a lot higher in wax and less percentage of fats. So the carrier oil stays the same, but your wax and your fat will alter depending on how hard or soft you want the cream. What I would say is with wax, there are loads out in the market now. Obviously, the go-to for most people is using beeswax, and you just get like these beeswax pellets, but you can also get soya wax, you can get rice wax, you can get carnauba wax, and the last one is used in a lot of vegan beauty products now. So that's a kind of like replacement for beeswax. But you can get those from any beauty suppliers. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be beeswax. Bearing in mind they all have like a slightly different smell as well. So beeswax tends to be more yellowy, so you're not going to get like a pure white cream if you're using beeswax, whereas rice wax and soya wax is quite white, so that won't affect the color. If you wanted to color things, you can get beauty colorings, but I generally, as a rule, with creams, I tend to avoid them. The other thing to think about is when you're making your creams that you will lose some of the water content in the butters and the carrier oil to evaporation. So if you do want to fill a 200 milliliter container, then you want to kind of aim for making like 220, so that you've got that like kind of 10% loss. And also because like when you're pouring things in, like some of the wax will stick to the bowl, and so you won't necessarily fill it up. So kind of use that as your ratio. So I've given you an example of what I would tend to use when I'm making a 200 ml cream. The nice thing about doTERRA is that they've already done some blends. So you could use, for example, 2 millimeters of like deep blue, or you could use Serenity or Citrus Bliss, or you can make your own combination up. But some of the hard work, if the thought of using top, middle and base notes is daunting, then you can use one of the blends that's already been made by doTERRA. They've taken the hard work out for you. They've done all the mathematics. So I just kind of wanted to give you an idea. This is the fats. Here in this picture, I've actually got cocoa butter and shea butter. And I used a deodorized shea butter just because it's less smelly. And then I'm just melting them, and the wax has already been melted. You could also add other stuff to your lotions and potions. So for example, you could, like a new one that's kind of come out is used coffee granules. So you could use that to help exfoliate the exfoliate with the cream if you wanted. Sugar is another good one because it dissolves into the skin. Jojoba beads, they're really nice. So they've kind of come into the beauty industry as a replacement for those awful plastic micro beads that you're seeing in lots of exfoliators. And of course, because they're jojoba, they absorb into the skin, and they offer another form of moisturization. Or you could use some dried herbs like dried chamomile or dried lavender if you wanted to just add something extra to the cream. And of course, that's the same with if you were making like bath oils or something. Obviously, like the dried the herbs or flowers would actually stay within the oil. But again, if you were going to do that, you keep your carrier oil the same, you keep your essential oils the same, but you reduce your wax by 2% and the fat by 0.7% of each. So I've just again given you an example based on what I've done already of your kind of weights that you would be looking. But this is for me, would say this is like the next level. This is when you're really comfortable with how much wax and butters you're using in your creams already, because then you're kind of experimenting with formulas. So how do we do it? Well, it's actually a lot easier than it sounds. Obviously, it sounds quite confusing when you're talking about weights and measurements and what you're going to use. But once you've done all that, once you've done the kind of maths, it's really easy. You're going to put your wax and your fat in your double boiler or in your bowl over your saucepan. And you're going to, sorry about my children screaming in the background. You're going to melt it down to 75 degrees. And that become quite... Celsius, and that become quite hot and liquidy, and then you actually want to wait for it to cool down until about 40. Now, the reason is that obviously you're going to affect the composition of the essential oils if you put it in when the liquid is too hot, and you don't need it that hot, so you don't want that to break down. It kind of I would say that that's the difference between like making a poor quality cream and a good quality cream, is when you put the essential oils in. So when you can just get like a cheap catering thermometer, like a sugar thermometer for this. When it gets to about 40, you want to put in your carrier oil, and obviously your carrier oil is cold, so it's going to cool it down a little bit further, and then you're going to put your drops of essential oils in. And this is the bit where you kind of have to make that decision where are you making a hard butter or a really fluffy butter? I kind of use mine as quite hard, so I just pour it straight into a container and then stick it in the fridge to chill. But what you could do is stick it in a mixer or get a hand whisk or electric hand whisk and whip it. And there are some really, really beautiful kind of pictures of really, really nice whipped creams. And actually, obviously, it increases the volume a little bit as well because you've added some air to it. And then you can put it into a nice pot. And I think the whipped creams look nicer if you're going to give them for gifts. Like the harder creams are really good if you're kind of want to create like a lip balm type thing, especially like with a muscle rub, and you just want something that's like compact in like a little round tin or something. Great. But if you want to make something that's a bit creative and a bit nice to look at as well, then I definitely suggest whipping it. And obviously if you've used something like cocoa butter and lots of wax, that will stay really firm as well. So that is that. What I would say is there's lots of things that I would avoid. Things like lemon. I wouldn't put lemon in a big batch of cream because it can make the other fats and oils go rancid after a while because of its composition. I'm just recording. Can we just... Yes.
Please have something to eat.
Yeah, in a minute. I'm just sorry. Welcome to. Yeah. So I would avoid things like lemon. I have used lemon in the past, and I've noticed. I'm recording. And I've noticed that it does affect the composition of the cream after a while. And then I did some research on it, and it was like, yeah, lemon's known for kind of making things go rancid quite quickly. So if you are going to use lemon, then I would make a really small batch that you're going to use quickly. It's not something that's going to last you like 6 months, for example. Whereas something like the less corrosive kind of oils, I guess, will last a lot longer, and you can get kind of 6 to 12 months out of them. So when I've made like the sunscreens, for example, you're not going to put anything that's photosynthetic in because it's sunscreen. So therefore they're hardier. They're not going to attract moisture. They're not going to make things deteriorate. And again, it's really worth considering, like, you want to keep these creams don't have any preservatives in, so you can find recipes with preservatives in, which will make the creams last longer, but of course they're not as natural. You're then adding chemicals to them. So my advice would be go with smaller batches and make them more frequent than go, I'm going to make a litre's worth of cream that's going to last me a year, because slowly the quality is going to deteriorate because you're not putting any artificial preservatives in it. So there is a ton of recipes out there for other things that you can make, but this is really like a really good base start for experimenting with just actual creams. And I know like TerraShield, for example, this is a great one for like if you're going on holiday, you could make a lotion with TerraShield in, so that you're not mixing it whilst you're there with a hand cream. You can tailor it to match like your family's requirements, and then obviously apply it wherever you need to as like your mosquito repellent or something. So there's so much that you can explore just with this really, really basic recipe. You can make so much interesting products. I would be really happy to talk about things like making bubble baths and stuff on another one if people are interested, or if there's anything that people do want to consider making, and then if they let me know, then I can put together some more information. But things like the blending of the different fragrances is really important, and I think it's something that actually comes up time and time again when people go, oh, how many drops do I use of this? And like, we tend to just say, oh, two of each, or when actually sometimes it's also personal choice. Like, that's a kind of like the ratio for putting things in is to get the best balance.
The kids are making me die in the background. They're hilarious, just running around like it looks like tea is causing mayhem. I love it.
But yeah, if you really like lavender, for example, and that's a top note, you might actually want to put more in. So there is an element of like working what's your what's your own personal preference. It's crazy in my house.
It's all right. It just goes to do this and be a parent.
Yeah, you can do doTERRA and do it. And the thing is, they loved getting involved in making all these things as well. So that's the other thing that I would say, is that it's actually quite good, especially for Kaylin's age. And like making lip balms and stuff like this, you can pretty much use this recipe again for making lip balms, but you might like up the wax slightly more and really reduce like the fats in it. But
the lip balms that we made last time, was it last year? Or
nearly.
And I've still got them because we made 5. And they're so good. They're the best moisturising lip balm I've ever had. Like, there's no like Vaseline comparison.
Well, that's it. There's no chemicals in them, and that really makes a difference. Like, you don't need to use, that's what I'm saying. I think the thing is as well, because we're so used to creams that don't necessarily always work, you know, we think, oh, we've got to have loads because we've got to use it all the time. But actually, like with the dry skin of like using lavender, melaleuca and frankincense on tea, for example, it's so effective so quickly that actually like you don't need to use it loads. You use it for a week and then it's like, oh, I don't need to use it again until maybe, you know, I mess up and eat something I shouldn't, and then I need to start again. But like, you don't need the volume that you would if you were buying it as well. And that's kind of the other thing that's worth considering, is that, you know, they work so effectively because there's nothing else. There's no other barriers in there. It's just all really good natural stuff. So yeah, my little
that was really interesting, because I didn't realize all those parts and all the different carrier oils. I mean, I'm such a kind of like, oh, coconut all the time, because I'm too lazy really to use anything else. Yeah, it's really interesting about all the different carrier oils.
Yeah,
and like, do you like to purchase like your products?
Well, I've got 2 suppliers that I tend to use, and for me, like, I am a kind of like creature of habit. So I've got like there's some amazing carrier oils out there. Like, I've got cottonseed oil. I've got cherry kern oil, I've got safflower oil. So there's loads of different things. Like, depends on if you want like an unfragranced carrier oil. If your skin's really dry or really oily, you're going to start looking. But I'll put the links if you want in the YouTube video, so that you can go and have a look. And obviously some people want to use organic carrier oils as well, so you're going to be looking at a more expensive carrier oil if you did that. But yeah, as a general rule, I tend to stick with safflower because it's a good all-rounder. Cocoa butter, because it's a bit harder, so it gives me a bit more stiffness without adding loads and loads of wax, because obviously wax then as well makes it a little bit more water resistant. So it's great for like nappy areas and stuff, because it stops the water from soaking into the skin. So like for baby cream, it's great to have like a really high wax content, but you don't want it so hard that you're literally scraping it. Like my first batch, I was like this, trying to get it out, and then poor T was like rubbing on like sandpaper on her. So like I didn't reduce the like softer butter, I just reduced the cocoa butter, but I wanted to have a little bit higher wax because then it made it more water resistant. So it's all these like trial and errors, like little tweaks to what's personal for you. And I really do like mango butter. That's my favourite, but because of it being mango, I can't use it around Kaylin. So I tend to stick with like shea butter, cocoa butter and safflower as my like 3 main components, and then like mix the ratios and the essential oils to make it a bit different. And I think you find like a middle ground. So I've got almond oil for my rollerballs, but safflower is also really good like for like serenity, like dream potions, because it absorbs so quickly. So then like there's no chance of it rubbing off before they go to sleep, so it literally penetrates the skin straight away and then it gets them to sleep really quickly. But you might want something that's a bit more slow releasing, like especially if you're doing a massage, you're not going to want something that is really quick absorbing, because you're going to constantly be adding carrier oils. So you want something that's really slow absorbing so that you've got time to massage it in. But again, just because it's slow absorbing, you don't necessarily want it to clog your skin. So it really depends like on what you're using the cream for, what your, you know, what the outcome is. And I think it's almost good sometimes, like writing it down, right? What is the cream? What is it I want to make it for? How am I going to apply it? And then work backwards from there. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So do I want it hard or soft? And like asking myself these questions. And I'm quite happy to draw like a little flow chart up for people if they want, so they know the kind of questions they want to ask themselves and where that leads them to what they should be using. But
It's such a, once you've made it as well, it's such a sense of achievement, because I'm always like, oh, I've made this.
and like I said, it, like I showed the picture at the beginning, like they make really nice Christmas presents. Like you can buy some really nice, like you can use old jars, but you can buy some nice packaging from these like beauty companies as well. And you know, your stuff can look really professional, and like
there's lots of little labels and stuff you can buy as well, isn't there? Like
exactly.
They do like little labels, and they even sell like, even containers if you're wanting to make things.
Exactly.
And always remembering, I suppose you need to use glass and
and that's a good thing again with the like with these kind of companies. They tend to only supply glass or aluminium, so they don't tend to use plastic. And if they use plastic, they kind of make you aware, you know, like don't use lemon or things like that. So most of the stuff you get is glass, and also just try and go for a dark glass as well, because again, like the sunlight, if it's a clear glass, can affect the oils, like just obviously the exposure to heat and sun. That's why doTERRA kind of tend to stick with dark bottles. But a little timer flashed up anyway.
I know. I was just saying that. Oh, it seemed like a minute.
2 minutes.
So, so we'll leave it then. I think you're just about to have a child stripping off. So it's all got too much for the kids.
I know. Attention, give me attention.
Absolutely hilarious. We're going to have to do like a whole call just with those two.
You missed it earlier. I've got like the BP assist that just came in my delivery, and I haven't had any for a few weeks. And T was like,
yeah,
like oh, she's like she literally is like,
she loves that.
What she's calling is because she wants them, because she can see them, and I won't let her.
Well, that was really interesting, Ali. Thank you so much. And like, obviously, time doing the slides and stuff, they were so informative. They were absolutely brilliant. I've just learned so much. It's made me eager to go shopping now.
I'll put the links on the Facebook, but obviously when we change it to a YouTube.
Yeah. People will go into YouTube. We can put it on there. Perfect.
Cool. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.